Good morning, Tamir Hayman. Good morning. The first time we met, I don't remember if don't know if you remember that you were the brigade commander of the Flying Brigade. It was during the second Intifada. A lot of things have happened ever since, but this is not a walk down memory line. I want to be very purposeful and place everything we're going to be talking about today into context, and that context is even much bigger than what most of us tend to think about it. And here, in your capacity as the director of the INSS and the former chief of the Intel Directorate with a very strong angle on ground forces, you were commander of the northern battalions, and also you were in the Armored Corps. I like to talk about geostrategy. People don't always think about the fact that our war has to do with the global war. Geostrategic change is the axis between Russia and Iran and China, and they don't even know that Russia has an interest that we will shed blood here until the West will fold versus them in the Ukraine. So how do you understand our war and the people who are paying a price for these bad global changes? So good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I think it's one of the most complex things in Israeli diplomacy, foreign diplomacy, to try to link between these two big wars of attrition that are going place and to draw one conclusion from them. Something clear that there is a global change trend in the world, and as part of this change, there's a new global order that's being shaped. We still don't know what it will look like, and we're trying to rush and give it names, but we need to wait and see how it unfolds. It's because there's a deep crisis in liberal democracies, a crisis which is multi-tiered. It has to do with the crisis of immigration, civil rights, terrorism, the disruption of supply chains, the disappointment with globalization, the wars that have come back into our lives. All of that is disrupting the principles that global peace and liberalism was based on. On the other hand, we see a different kind of approach rising of a political and strategic policy which is not democratic, and they think it's really going well. And this fault line between the liberal democratic bloc led by the U.S. and the other bloc, I'm not going to name it right now, but this is the bloc of China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and others. They are both involved in these two wars, the war in the Ukraine and the war in Gaza. So how will these things fit together or come together ultimately? That's very important. And we also need to link that with the elections in the U.S. The fact that President Trump was elected and he has declared that he will put an end to the war in the Ukraine. It will probably come at the expense of the Ukrainians and not the Russians. With respect to Gaza, I don't think it really matters whether Harris or Trump would have been elected. We would have received the same freedom. But what is the significance of a Russian victory in the Ukraine and its impact on the Middle East? Will that mean that Putin will be freer to arrange the Middle East, or he will feel more free that he continue to undermine the situation so that he'll have a greater hold on the Middle East? So before we move on to our different fronts or arenas, something very short that has to do with the elections in the U.S. In my opinion, at least, it's hard to know because he's bringing two opposite things with him, Trump. One of it is traditional American isolationism. We're not all aware of it, and until they were attacked in Pearl Harbor as a result of this isolationism, they didn't participate in World War II. But on the other hand, he's kind of a wacko, and he's the one who led to the targeted killing of Qasem Soleimani. Even it was against the opinion of Bibi, but that's what he said. But the question is, how is he perceived? What do you think the Iranians are thinking about his being elected? So first of all, it wasn't in contradiction to Bibi's opinion. At least that's what he claimed. The targeted killing of Soleimani was one of the most important things that happened with respect to reducing Iran's capability to spread out in the Middle East. So it's good that that happened. Now, regarding this matter, look, Trump is an unexpected man, and he holds the biggest gun in the world. So it's scary, it's deterring. So this effect of deterrence, because of this effect, most of Israel's enemies would have wished for something else. Iran, Hezbollah, they would have wished for something more predictable, something that can be predicted. This element increases deterrence, so there's a positive element to it. But in addition to that, there's also a negative element. The instability is something that also deters America's friends. Let me give you an example. When I was chief of the Intel Directorate, overnight the U.S. decided to withdraw from Syria and to completely abandon the Kurds and others. It was a huge crisis that led to the resignation of the American Secretary of Defense, but it happened overnight, and there was a rumor that it would happen in Iraq as well, and the U.S.'s withdrawal from Iraq could have taken out the balancing element in the Middle East. Let's hope that won't happen, because if that will happen, we're truly risking Jordan, and we're expanding Iran's influence almost towards the border of Israel. So there are two elements here. In the short term, the element of deterrence is good for Israel. It reduces our enemies' freedom of action, but in the long run, instability might affect international alliances in Europe. The fact that the axis led by Russia could receive tailwind, and that has a negative effect. Okay, so now let's talk about Iran. You know, ultimately, by now, everybody knows, especially when they keep hearing you on TV almost every day, that it's the head of the octopus and that it has proxies. And this is something that the general population didn't know, that Hamas and Hezbollah are two only enemies, are proxies. As far as Iran is concerned, of course, they also have their own motivations, but Iran has been stricken, and now it's facing a major dilemma. I think for the first 6 months it was on a high under the direct impression of what they did to us, but now they're in distress. What do you think? I think that in recent years we've missed the sense of strategic supremacy Iran has and the connection between Hamas and Iran. This connection between a superpower that considers itself supreme to Israel strategically, meaning that they can defeat Israel not through a direct war, but through a long attrition. We did have signs. We saw that with Hezbollah. We saw that with a different behavior, but we didn't interpret these signs correctly, and we definitely didn't interpret the fact that Hamas considered itself part of that supreme entity, and that's what gave them the confidence to do that terrible thing that they did. Now, Iran has almost exercised all of its powers, but it didn't work optimally. So Iran needs to thoroughly re-examine all of the foundations of their national security. First of all, are they a threshold? Are they the fact that they're a nuclear threshold country, is it a sufficient deterrence? Because the fact is that they've been attacked. For the first time since Iran-Iraq war, another country attacked Iran, and the U.S. is advancing capabilities in the region. So they're going to ask themselves a real question. Maybe it's not enough to be a threshold country. They need to take that extra step in order to actually be a nuclear country. Another element, their defense capabilities did not provide any results. Israel could do everything it wanted, and it simply peeled away all of their air defense capabilities and disrupted their manufacturing capacities of surface-to-surface missiles in a way that, of course, they are thinking whether to say it or to expose themselves to a new Israeli attack. On the other hand, all the proxies are in action, and they're acting full force, and they do not manage to stop Israel. The crown of their glory, Hezbollah, in 4 amazing strikes of Israel in the intel community, the Mossad, and anyone else who was involved. It's not that it was completely dismantled, Hezbollah, but they're no longer this huge threat, potential threat. And the Houthis and the Iraqis, I think that there will be a revision with the proxies and also within the Iranian army and also with respect to the Iranian nuclear strategy. From our angle, is that perhaps an appealing opportunity to address the nuclear issue in Iran now that they don't have a proxy that threatens us? You don't have any official position. You're just the director of the INSS, so feel free to express your opinion. I think it's a great opportunity. I agree. It is an opportunity as long as you bring a good result. And, no doubt, the fact that Hezbollah is no longer the potential threat that it posed. I'm saying this for the second time. Hezbollah still exists. They've renewed their command and control chains. They have 40,000 combatants. It hasn't disappeared. It hasn't experienced a defeat. But the fact that this huge potential threat in a regional war, that there could be a nuclear attack, it no longer exists, this threat. And the fact that the air defense capabilities of Iran have been completely peeled away and the support of the U.S., that's a chance. But what's the risk? You cannot do an attack which is only for the purpose of signaling or was postponed by 2 years, because that will push them full throttle into nuclear. Maybe the result will be that the U.S. will attack. If you could promise me here, if you could say, look, if they'll reach enrichment of 90%, then the U.S. will attack full force, I'd say, let's go for it. Let's go back to the Trump effect. The man doesn't like wars, in contrast to people's opinion. He doesn't like wars because war are spending the resources of the U.S. in places that are far from the U.S., where they don't have an interest. He would prefer to invest in the Rust Belt and not in attacking facilities in Iran. So if that were the case, and the U.S. is with us for sure, full force to attack the nuclear project of Iran, this is a historic opportunity we mustn't lose. But if not, then we're tempted to do something partial, and the only thing we'll achieve is pushing them towards nuclear capability. And the U.S. won't be with us, and we'll have a nuclear Middle East. We are bringing upon ourselves an unprecedented strategic threat on Israel.
I'd like to speak to you a lot about Hamas and Hezbollah, but everybody hears about it now. So let's take one step forward. We have placed Iran on the horns of dilemma to attack or not to attack. We've caused them a strategic failure. But so are we. How are we going to get out of the situation with the hostages? Our central problem is with Gaza, not with Iran, where we have sort of reversed the situation to a degree in terms of deterrence, and we possess the resilience and the flexibility. And with Hezbollah, it will end up with some sort of an agreement. After the damage caused them and after what we've done, I won't go into the details. Of course, it seems to me that it is an agreement that we will be better able to enforce. We've learned something about Lebanon. I believe the entire security establishment has learned something. But about the hostages, I'll say something perhaps not very popular. In my evaluation, in my opinion, anything that can be reversed, that can be changed, should be done in order to bring in a maximum of the hostages. A ceasefire and a retreat or withdrawal. Everybody has become a specialist. Article 8, Article 14, these are just mere details. Hamas has always wanted one thing, to have us withdraw from the Gaza Strip, and, of course, the heavy price of freeing horrible criminals, horrible killers. But it is a moral duty of the first order. There's something I don't understand. Ceasefire. Do you know how many ceasefires have been violated in Israel's wars? More than those that were abided by. A ceasefire is not something that is holy. We know that Hamas will not materialize all their undertaking in the deal. They will have so many excuses to violate the ceasefire. But after we've brought back our people, whoever we can still bring back, I don't consider the ceasefire as God's holy gospel. It is a ceasefire, merely a ceasefire, okay. But the issue of withdrawing or not, who can prevent us from going back? They say that the U.S. will do that, but the U.S. has tried with all its might to stop us from going into Rafah. And it was in a period that the relations with the U.S. were much more thorny. So I don't really find an obstacle here. We should bring our people back, and the war with Hamas, if it has to continue, will continue. It might continue for dozens of years. But first, let's do the right thing. Let's bring the people back, and then continue with the military operations. I don't think I have to tell you now that your opinion is very popular, very popular indeed. The hostages, home. And I believe that the last 4 months were amazing. Chapeau to all those who are addressing this. This has really modified the picture. And before ending, I'd like to bring you back. I don't know if you remember what does a tank look like from the inside, but that's where you were born. This is the love of my youth, says Mr. Hayman. But you know that your threat was always from the front and not a vertical one. And Hezbollah is very disappointed by its capabilities, but the UAV has really entered the scene in full force. And as a previous head of a division, head of Intel, how do you consider the position of UAVs now in the light also of the war in Ukraine and here and for the coming 5 years? Well, there are two effects. The UAV has really taken a very centralized industry and turned it into a very localized, dispersed little industries that can create UAVs. This enables people to smuggle in kits to assemble. The Hezbollah today possesses an assembly capability that's almost infinite. And so this has disrupted this whole world of bigger formations and has given strength and power to smaller ones. On the second level, we are going more and more into a robotic battlefield. A robotic battlefield, so in the future, everything will be based on unmanned capabilities, and that is going to revolutionize the battlefield more than the French Revolution. It's going to be the revolution of the soldier, of the infantry, and it's going to be based on the economic capabilities of each party. And the question is, how does one win such a battle? And so the answer is probably addressing and harming the economic capability, and that, of course, involves also the citizens at home, on the home front. And this is, of course, going to exacerbate further those trends that we are witnessing today, and again, the issue of how to win a battle in this modern world. It was a huge pleasure to start this morning with this very educational conversation, very enriching. I'm inviting you to another conversation, also surely educational, on UVID 13 next year. Thank you very, very much, Major General.